Good afternoon. Had to run a little bit. I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything today, and wow. I don't know what that was all about. No one needs to know. But that's just, I don't know what that was all about. I've seen it in other places, but I won't say how I saw it in other places. But listen, I saw a man dismantle a pulpit once, so nothing shocks me anymore. He jumped up and he was doing karate and everything. Next thing I know, that the pulpit was in pieces. I kid you not. So I don't know what happened there. So we won't go there. If we've learned one thing about Elohim in our studies about his nature, we've learned that when the Godhead works, they work with extreme precision and precise timing. We have many who disagree and who argue, but we have yet to completely comprehend and understand the level of precision that Elohim is capable of bringing to any project that they set their minds to. But the Eternal Father is the one who knows the exact timing concerning the period that is coming. One that began at the creation of the world and culminates in Yeshua's return to reclaim rulership of all creation. The time of this is only known to the Eternal. Not even Yeshua knows as yet. He may by now, but at the time of the writings, he did not know. At least that's what he told us. If we start, let's go to Mark, the 13th chapter, 32nd verse. Mark, the 13th chapter, the 32nd verse, where it says, "But concerning that day and the hour, no one knows, not the angels, those in heaven, nor the Son, except the Father." It goes further in Matthew 24 and 36. Matthew, 24th chapter, the 36th verse. "But as to that day and that hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven, except my Father only." Acts, the 1st chapter, the 6th verse. "Then indeed, coming together, they questioned him, saying, 'Rabbi, do you restore the kingdom to Israel at this time?' And he said to them, 'It is not yours to know times or seasons which the Father placed in his own authority.'" In other words, he didn't even place it in my authority as yet. Only he knows. "Yet, this time is appointed." And with pinpoint precision, as we will see when it gets to that time, we will be amazed to see that he will come up at just the right time to keep something insane from happening. Perhaps what? We need to look at some things. From a scientific standpoint, you have a man right now threatening nuclear annihilation because he was insulted. This is what we're dealing with here. Now, perhaps he doesn't even know what a nuclear bomb does. Every test that they've ever done has been with an atomic. Atomic works on an atomic level. It deals with atoms. It doesn't go below that level. When you're dealing with something on the nuclear level, you're dealing with something at the subatomic level, which means you go right to the core of every molecule in the universe. Once you do that, and it sets off what they call a chain reaction. Theoretically, oh, that would take out a whole city. No. Think further. Molecules are in every city. Molecules are in every city. They're in every town. They're in every piece of wood on this podium. They're all through this microphone. They're all out into all around the earth. Every planet is composed of these. So theoretically, he could set off something on earth that could take out everything in the universe. We don't think about these things because we don't think on that level. We're not a scientific country. Oh, we could be. The people that we put in those positions should be. But we don't think. We just think about what we want. We've got to learn to think bigger than that. We have to learn the kind of precision that God brings to anything he chooses to do. But look at the Bible. All the books are written. All of these things are written in what seems sometimes to be a code. Yet, if you read it properly over time, sometimes you go back and read something, and it makes more sense today than it did yesterday. You read it a week from now, it might make more sense than it did last week. The book breathes, the book lives. The book is real. Some believe it, some don't. These codes and all of these other things are there are so well thought out and so precise that it's entirely possible for, sometimes you'll ask people and they'll give you an answer that doesn't make sense. It's okay to say sometimes, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe that's not it. We haven't learned yet to work with the precision of Elohim. So there should be no expectation of perfection. There should be no expectation that we have all the answers, although some people will lie and tell you they do. Only one person has all the answers. And within this precision, the Bible will amaze you. Satan will amaze you too, but in a quite different way. He tends to destroy things, but even his destruction shows the glory of Elohim. He, in all of his rambling and fighting out there in the universe, destroyed all the other planets. Yet, those planets still rotate in cues that are so precise that calendars and clock designs are based upon their movements. Even though allegedly the universe is in chaos, as once was the world, what they call tohu and bohu. Yet, despite the fact that we have perfect calendars and clock designs based on the allegedly off movements of all of those little planets out there, we have the nerve to recalculate our calendars because of the alleged imprecision of the orbit cues. No one has considered that the calendars and the clock calculations of man might be off. Never thought about that. Oh, no, we can't be wrong. Oh, we can't be wrong. Oh, but you can. But you see, scientists who study the atom and study the particles of matter that orbit the atom find the same precision in every atom that the Godhead bring to everything that they create. Yet, God's most precise and intricate creation has yet to be fully understood. Oh, we think we understand it. Medicine claims to understand it. Challenge that concept, and they will come at you. But there's a reason why they call it practicing medicine. There's a reason for that. Because they haven't got it right yet. They haven't brought it to perfection yet. Oh, eventually they say they will. That they haven't yet. Yet for all of the precision set in place by Elohim, mankind is satisfied to substitute speed for precision. We're happy to substitute quantity for quality. Well, they're not very well made, but we got a bunch of them. We're satisfied substituting coming close to perfection. We're satisfied with almost when God says yes. Yet, he doesn't play the games we play. Elohim doesn't play horseshoes or hand grenades. So he's not happy with close. He wants dead on. He demands complete obedience, timely and precise worship. Timely more so than precision in that. We were allowed because we have our own ideas. As you go through time, we notice that worship is different. Then we went too far with that and decided the day could change. As long as that worship is correct, he's not interested in how you do it, as long as it is worshipful. If you're dancing and shaking and crazy, there's something wrong with that. That's not worship. That's for us. That's ego. That's not exactly what he had in mind. We've got to learn that. But we have to get to that point where we understand that he demands complete obedience. Now, the Israelites, they were spared their slavery in Egypt, and they were given a leader, Moses. They were fed. Neither their clothes or shoes wore out for 40 years. That in itself makes me laugh, because sometimes I think, you know how some people are. After about 2 days, they want some more shoes. Shut up, Ray. But they went out for 40 years. 40 years they wore the same clothing. It never wore out in the wilderness of sin. They defeated the Canaanites in battle and were ready to move on against Edom when they decided, or should I say others among them, convinced them that they were deciding that they wanted to go in a different direction. Once they became frustrated or a little afraid, they began to murmur against the Eternal and murmur against Moses. Let's drop anchor. Let's go to Numbers, the 21st chapter, the fourth verse. Numbers, the 21st chapter, 4th verse. And they pulled up stakes from Mount Hor by the way to the Red Sea and to go around the land of Edom. And the soul of the people became impatient because of the way. Oh, he's giving us everything, but it's taking too long. Sound like anybody? Taking too long. And the people spoke out against Yahweh and against Moses. Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread and there is no water. And our soul hates this light bread. Oh, you hate it? I thought there was nothing to eat. But, here we go again. Ungrateful, unthankful. And Yahweh sent, as we saw last week, and Yahweh sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many people of Israel died. And the people came into Moses and said, "We have sinned, for we have spoken against Yahweh and against you. Pray to Yahweh, and he shall turn the serpent away from us." And Moses prayed on behalf of the people. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, "Make yourself a fiery serpent and set it on a pole. And it shall be that when anyone is bitten, when he sees it, he shall live." And Moses made a serpent of bronze and put it on a pole. And it happened, if a serpent had bitten any man, when he looked to the bronze serpent, he lived. Elohim has a fascinating sense of irony. The serpent encouraged man's rebellion. God sent serpents to punish the complainers and rebels. Then Yahweh had Moses make a brass serpent as a point of healing. Yet man never truly learns. Note what happens down the line with the Israelites by the time of King Hezekiah. Let's go to 2 Kings, the 18th chapter, the first verse. 2 Kings, the 18th chapter, the first verse. And it happened in the 3rd year of Hosea, son of Elah, king of Israel. Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did the right thing in the sight of the Eternal, according to all that David his father did. He removed the high places and broke the pillars and cut down the Asherah. That would be a pole that they used to worship, an idol. And he broke in pieces the bronze serpent which Moses had made. For until those days the sons of Israel burned incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan. Fascinating. For a title, we'll call this one Matrix of Satan, Part 6. You probably already heard it, but this is more for recording purposes than anything else. But Matrix of Satan, Part 6. Nehushtan and the Lie of Imprecision. Rather than obey, they rebelled, and when punished, then healed, they began to worship again the creation. This brass snake fashioned around a pole. They found it easier to worship this brass snake than the Creator. In his attempt to bring them back to a true worship, Hezekiah destroyed this Nehushtan pole, yet it lives on today, and man looks to it and only appears to be healed. Satan, it seems, also has some sense of irony. The human body, the fleshly one, we have no idea what the spiritual body consists of. We can't deal with this. How are we going to possibly handle that? But it seems Satan also has a sense of irony. But he is there thinking of the intricacy and the incredibly complex organism here. The human body is the most complex organism on the planet. Its design is beyond compare. And the medical community is to this day more baffled by it than they will ever admit. Oh, most of us have little idea how incredible this body is. Because you see, when it's at peak efficiency, we don't even notice it. Oh, but let something go wrong. Oh, my goodness. What's wrong now? And you go to the doctors. How many have gone to the doctors for years and they still can't figure it out? Oh, we don't know. But we'll try this. Here, take this. Here, take that. Take this and call me in the morning. And 20 years later, you still may have high blood pressure. You still may have diabetes. You still may have something else. David knew what he was dealing with. He knew who he was dealing with. And he knew the body for what it was. Let's go to Psalms, the 139th chapter, the 14th verse. Psalms, the 139th chapter, the 14th verse where it says, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are marvelous, and my soul knows it well. Go to Psalms, the 92nd chapter, the 4th verse. Psalms, the 92nd chapter, the 4th verse, where it says, For you have made me rejoice with your work, O Yahweh, for joy at the works of your hands. O Yahweh, how great are your works. Your thoughts are very deep. You see, the human body is a marvel. The earth as well is a marvel. Yet we have never seen either organism in their full glory, as the Godhead intended them. We've only seen what has been beat up by the degradation that has caused all the way back from the first sin in the garden up to now. Neither have we seen in their former state. The earth in itself is enough. But the human body originally was intended to last through the entire millennium. 1,000 years. Most of us at 58, I'm thinking, this hurts. My knee hurts. And you get older, it gets worse. The idea of a millennium, I don't know. But it was designed and intended to last out an entire millennium. And will again when that day comes and all is made new. The entire earth was originally intended to have one climate, one weather pattern, and its environment was to be like a greenhouse. A canopy of water surrounded it to keep the sun's harmful rays out and made precipitation unnecessary, or at least in any form called rain. The precipitation came up as dew straight out of the ground every morning. You find it right here in Genesis, but we tend to accept the evolutionary model and dismiss it. Oh, that couldn't have possibly watered the whole plant for a whole day. How could that be? But notice this. As I've said, we tend to like to deal with things as we see them instead of dealing with them as they were from the origins. If you look at it from the origins, you see a little bit different picture. If you know, most people, they will suggest if you're going to go into it and study of the Bible, If you're going to go into a study of the Bible, you do best to start at Genesis. Doesn't matter where you go from there, but start with Genesis, because everything begins there. Let's go to Genesis, the 1st chapter, the 6th verse. Genesis, the 1st chapter, the 6th verse, where it says, "And Elohim said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters." That word is H7459, the Hebrew rakaya, or expanse, in the middle of the waters. "And let it divide the waters from the waters." What? Oh, you're talking about dividing one ocean from? No. He said the waters from above the water. Oh, you're talking about clouds, right? No, not necessarily. "And let it divide the waters from the waters. And Elohim made the firmament and divided the waters which were from under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament." You're talking about two completely different bodies of water. Water, one floating around the outside, one on the planet. And some people want to argue about that too, but it's real. And it was so. Verse 8. "And Elohim called the firmament heaven." Hebrew 88064. Shemayim Shemay. "And the evening and the morning were the second day." Okay, now you've read it for yourselves. There was an expanse of space that divided the water above the earth from the water below the space. The water above the sky, or space, protected the earth from the harmful rays of the sun. It also created an effect that made it easy for plants to grow on the land set within that firmament. Let's go to Genesis, the 1st chapter, 9th verse. Genesis, the 1st chapter, the 9th verse, where it says, "And Elohim said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together to one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and he called the gathering together of the waters seas. And Elohim saw that it was good." Oh, better than good. It was amazing. Plants simply grew out of the ground, and Adam and Eve simply plucked them from the ground or from the trees and ate them. Man during this time was able to live anywhere from 900 to 1,000 years and was in perfect health for most of that time because of the atmosphere we survived in. Even for a time after the canopy came down, we lived for quite a while. But more about that later. Plants were abundant, and this is what Elohim originally intended man to eat. Now, I'm sure there are some who would argue that Yahweh gave Adam permission to eat meats, yet that came later. But that was not the original intention. You see, let's go through this in context and understand it a little bit better. Genesis, the 1st chapter, 27th verse. Genesis, the 1st chapter, the 27th verse, where it says, "And Elohim created man in his image. In the image of Elohim, he created him. He created them male and female." How many? No more. 28. "And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the heavens, and all animals that move upon the earth. And Elohim said, behold, I have given you every herb-seeding seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree seeding seed. Ever eaten anything that doesn't have seeds in it? I'm sure you have. I have. Ever wonder where it came from? I did. That's why I stopped eating them. If it doesn't have seeds in it, He said seeding. If it didn't come from a seed, that means it came from somewhere else. And if it was made from something else, we don't know what something else put in it. And every tree in which is the fruit of a tree seeding seed, to you it shall be for food. So the expectation initially was that we would eat fruit, vegetables, grains. Verse 30, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the heavens, and to every creeper on the earth, which has in it a living soul, every green plant is for food. And it was so. So, if we were supposed to eat it, and the animals were supposed to eat it, what's all that stuff going on in animal kingdom? Where the lion goes after the wildebeest and just rips it apart. You have to turn it and hide your kids' eyes. Of course, by now they're probably used to it. And Elohim saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. As we can see here, the original intent was that man, as well as the animals, were to be herbivores, plant eaters, grain eaters, fruit eaters. This was the original plan. And Isaiah's prophecy is consistent with this for the end time. Notice what he states here in Isaiah, the 11th chapter, the 6th verse. A lot of people didn't understand this. What is he talking about? Oh, it makes perfect sense when you understand the whole plan. Isaiah, the 11th chapter, the 6th verse, where it says, and the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid. And the calf and the cub lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed. Their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. I'm sure when you first heard about those combinations, you were thinking, well, the wolf is definitely going to have some lamb chops tonight. No, that's not how it was intended. No. He's saying that these don't eat each other. They all will eat straw. They will all eat grass. They all will eat vegetables. They will eat fruit, not each other. And that was the original intent. And this is a picture of what will happen in the millennium. All will eat green food and grain in the kingdom, just as they did not from the beginning. It was intended this way, but it didn't happen that way. But in the end, God's plan will be accomplished. His word will not come back void. And in this paradise earth, man will live anywhere from 300 to 900 years. This seems impossible when we can barely make it for the 70 that we were promised in Psalms 90:10. But it is true. Just look at some of the ages of the patriarchs. Let's go to Adam. If you look at Adam, Adam lived how long? 930 years. Seth lived 912 years. He was born when Adam was 130. So this was common back then. This wasn't a big thing. They were used to it. Enosh was 815 years old when Seth was born. He was 105. Canaan lived 910 years. And he was born when Enosh was 90. Jared lived 962 years, and he was born when Mahalalel was 65. Enoch, 365 years. He was born when Jared was 162. Methuselah, 969 years. Born when Enoch was 65. Lamech, 777 years. Born when Methuselah was 187. They were used to this. This went on. Noah lived 950 years. We think we know why Yahweh was offended when Sarah laughed at the prospect of having a child for Abram at 100. This was not uncommon for older people to have children for so long. Some of us probably thought that Sarah was being logical. These ages that we've seen suggest otherwise. Maybe we weren't dealing with logic, but impatience. But let's get back to the consequences of sin in this scenario. I brought up a couple of names, not only because of their ages, but because of the circumstances of a certain prophecy. I won't quote the scripture because it's in the book of Enoch, which is not in here. And some folk contend that the apocryphal books aren't part of the Bible, therefore it's better to not use them. And I'm not completely disagreeing with that. You have to be very careful, as I've said so many times, when you're using anything other than the Bible, or if you use other Bibles. If you find out that that thing is paraphrased, a paraphrase means he said something like. Would you go to court and say, he said something like in your testimony? Oh, he said something like. No. The defense is going to rip you apart. You think he won't rip you apart for that? Oh, the Bible said something like. No. It's got to be the right book. It's got to be the right word, or you're going to have some problems. You might not come up with them right away, but you'll come up with them. Best thing to do, stick to a Bible that has the words of God as they were dictated. The apocryphal books, good for history, not good to set doctrine. But occasionally you do need a little bit of that information, so you use it. You have to, but occasionally, not all the time. But what I want to deal with here is the prophecy, because it happened. Methuselah was born in the year 687 and died in 1656. His name means, dying, he shall send. He shall send what? We shall soon see. Notice the capital H. This was from Elohim. This is the prophecy that Enoch gave. And what did Elohim send in 1656? Let's take a look so we don't have to guess. Note that Noah was 600 years old in the year 656. And mourning periods were usually 7 days or so for men of renown in the days of Noah. Methuselah would have been such a man. Historically, we know that the flood came in the year 1656, meaning that Yahweh allowed the normal 7-day mourning period before the flood came. Now, Shiva is a Hebrew word meaning 7 and refers to a 7-day period of formalized mourning by the immediate family of the deceased, in this case, Methuselah. Shiva begins immediately after the burial and concludes a short time after the morning service, 7 days later. The rabbis cite Genesis, the 7th chapter, the 10th verse, as the earliest instance of Shiva. And it came to pass after the 7 days when the waters of the flood were upon the earth. The 7 days, say the rabbis, were a period of mourning for Methuselah, the oldest man who ever lived. In Genesis, the 50th chapter, the 10th verse, the reference is made even more explicit, where the text says. Let's go to Genesis, the 50th chapter, the 10th verse. Genesis, the 50th chapter, the 10th verse. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond Jordan. And there they mourned with a great and very sore lamentation, for Joseph made a mourning for his father 7 days. Now, note the warning that Yahweh gave to Noah. Genesis, the 7th chapter, the 4th verse. Genesis, the 4th chapter, the 7th chapter, the 4th verse. For in 7 more days I will cause it to rain upon the earth, 40 days and 40 nights. And I will destroy from off the face of the earth every living thing that I have made. And Noah did according to all that Yahweh commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his wife and his son and his son's wives went in with him into the ark because of the waters of the flood. And of the clean animals and of the animals that were not clean and of the fowls and of everything that creeps upon the earth, 2 by 2 they went into Noah in the ark, male and female, as Yahweh had commanded Noah. And it happened after 7 days that the waters of the flood came into being on the earth. And in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, in the 7th day of the month, notice the precision here. If we would sit down and play with the calendar, we could probably come up with an exact day for the flood. In this day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of the heavens were opened up. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Where do you think that rain came from for 40 days and 40 nights? It was the collapsing of the canopy of water above the earth. The catastrophic event changed the earth forever. Before the canopy collapsed, the earth's climate was uniform throughout the planet. Now, because of sin, it was now cold in some areas and incredibly hot in others. This was caused by the tilting of the earth and the collapsing of the canopy of water above the earth. The seasons are caused as the earth tilts on its axis, traveling in a loop around the sun each year. Summer happens in the hemisphere tilted toward the sun, and winter happens in the hemisphere tilted away from the sun. As the earth travels around the sun, the hemisphere is tilted toward or away from the sun, causing these changes. Note the precision of the positioning of the earth, where a slight tilt of the planet's axis causes seasonal changes on the planet that are still not enough to destroy all life on it. Only to make it a little bit more challenging. Wind, rain, storms, snow, all because of the breaking of the canopy of water. Why? Because of sin. The climate was no longer now uniform. Weather would change, and more drastically as the earth became more and more polluted by human sin. The nature of animals changed. As men had begun to eat meat, animals had also turned in nature and begun to hunt each other. All of this happened before the flood. It happened in the Garden of Eden, when the skins for Adam and Eve to cover themselves were made. This was the first sacrifice made for sin. At this point, it is likely that meat may have been eaten, Noah being given the okay to do so in Genesis, the 9th chapter, the 3rd verse. He was given that okay because the earth was now changing drastically. Climate was changed. The canopy was now gone. The soil, as promised, as cursed, would be harder to till. The sun would now burn more hotly, causing cancer and other problems. And all of this would lead up to the mess that we find ourselves in now. Elohim gave us, through the children of Israel, a perfect plan to overcome most of the problems of mankind's cleanliness of body, and had already separated the clean animals from the unclean. Genesis 9:3 seemed to allow Noah the ability to eat all things, but if clean was already separated from unclean, would Noah and his family, being obedient as evidenced by taking 100 years to build an ark, to float in water, in perfect sunshine, and rounding up the animals precisely as Yahweh commanded? Yahweh had no need to tell them that they could only eat clean animals. And he expected, and they did, obey. He already knew it, and he already was obedient in this regard. Even most commentaries slip on this very important point, but Paul nailed it in Galatians 5:18 when he said that if you be led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Let's go to Galatians, the 5th chapter, the 16th verse. Galatians, the 5th chapter, the 16th verse. But I say, walk in the Spirit, and you will not fulfill the lusts of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, lest whatever you may will, these things you do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. He's not saying that there is no law. He's just saying that if you're not breaking it, it cannot punish you. The Spirit will lead you to the truth if you wish to know it. But most people don't care. They don't understand their bodies. They only go by what their senses tell them. If it looks good, smells good, tastes good, and doesn't make you too sick, they'll eat it. That is exactly what Satan wants us to think. Yet only when health is robbed from us do we begin to concern ourselves with what we take into our bodies. These bodies no longer last 900 years. They no longer last 900 years. Many mistake Genesis 6:3 for the eternal, saying that man would live for 120 years. Checking the timeline, as I did earlier, there were 120 years from when this was said to the flood. The wording is key. God said, I will no longer strive with man. The word used is the Hebrew H, 1777, din, meaning a verb, meaning to bring justice, to go to court, to pass sentence, to contend, to act as a judge, to govern. The verb regularly involves bringing justice or acting as a judge. Elohim declared here, I will no longer judge man. Implication being, I have now pronounced sentence. That's what the flood was. I will pronounce sentence and do the deed, which he did when he collapsed the upper canopy on the world and allowed it to deal on its own with the chaos surrounding it, as he did with the Israelites when they demanded a king of Samuel. We saw that in Matrix 2. But we live in a world that has completely forgotten Elohim. And as it gets sicker, it gets farther and further away from him. Instead of drawing in, instead of praying, instead of asking for healing. We constantly see people sicker and sicker, and people die younger and younger. And from some of the most hideous diseases known to man. Leukemia, cancers of all kinds. The research on this indicates that a lot of these, matter of fact, if you really do the digging, all of them were man-made. Lupus, AIDS, and there's so many more. Plus the chronic ones that stay with you and rob you slowly of your mortality and vitality over the years. Hypertension, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, and the more deadly strains of venereal disease that are out now. You've got several strains of syphilis now that will kill you. Gonorrhea, chlamydia. There are a couple of strains of gonorrhea that will kill you if not treated. Yet, we look to doctors for our health. And don't get me wrong, they can be incredibly helpful when we are in crisis. You don't get a gunshot and say, oh, I'm going to go to the herb doctor and I'm going to take herb. No. You've got to go to somebody that knows how to deal with trauma, knows how to get that bullet out, heal it, sew it, and do these things. Yet the educational system for medicine is horribly out of touch with the realities of the human body because we're never taught anything about it. The body is made to heal itself if allowed the time and if fed properly. But few medical professionals have more than an hour or two of training in nutritional avenues of health, and they usually take them very early in the process. Most of them will tell you that they take all of their nutritional courses in pre-med before they get to the good stuff, where they cut you up. Food is simply not part of the medical curriculum. Yet every second grader has heard it said that you are what you eat. You are what you eat. So the question comes up very quickly, well, why do we have this disconnect at the doctor's office? If kids know that you are what you eat, I can't tell you how many times you go into a doctor's office and you get a whole workup of drugs for this and that, and you say, well, isn't there something I could eat that might make this better? You can eat anything you want. No, you can't. But you see, it all comes back to Nehushtan. Hezekiah destroyed the bronze snake and called it what it was. An idol. It had become an idol. The Israelites worshipped it as the source of their healing after their whining in sin in the wilderness of sin. As we heard, snakes were sent among them to punish them for their rebellion and distrust in Yahweh and Moses. And Yahweh had Moses craft this snake around the bronzed pole as their source of healing. It was there for irony. It was there to show them something. But somehow this bronze serpent that was made out in the desert, all of a sudden, we've seen it before. If you've gone into your doctor's office, I'm sure you've seen it, except for now it's white, and it has a little white snake that goes around it. Anything. It's the sign of the American Medical Association. It's the symbol of the American Medical Association. And mankind, in Satan's little trick of irony, has looked to this profession for its healing. And at one time, they did a decent job. Many in some areas still do. Yet a fascinating prophecy has come to symbolize what medicine is today. And if you want to run a medical practice in this country, you have to go along, as this is where the industry is now. Galatians, the 5th chapter, 19th verse. Might not seem like we're talking about medicine initially, but if we go through it, we'll see what I'm talking about. Galatians, the 5th chapter, 19th verse. For the works of the flesh are clearly revealed, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lustfulness, idolatry, sorcery, hatreds, fightings, jealousies, angers, rivalries, divisions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and things like these, of which I tell you before, as I told you. I also said before that they who do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. Now, this sorcery is a fascinating word found only once in the Bible. It is not G533, which is pharmakos, which is translated in Revelation 22 as sorcery. It is G5331, pharmakia, witchcraft. Witchcraft, which, depending on its use, can mean helpful substances or drugs used in the black arts or witchcraft. A drug, which according to the Greek translators here is used both for a curative or medicinal drug, but can also be a poisonous one or street drugs. You know, weed, cocaine, heroin, crystal meth, or trance-inducing drugs like LSD or other things that are used in magical incantations that the Wiccans use in their witchcraft. All of this for the purpose of altering your mental state. But this is the center of medicine now, drugs, pharmakia. And the way they use it, you would almost think it was witchcraft. It's insane. They give you a drug and they say, oh, you look at it, they say, this is for this, and this, by 5 or 6 different things. And yours might be there or might not. Oh, well, you use this in combination with this. What are we doing now, playing games? Playing horseshoes? Well, if it gets close, you might get well. No. That's not how that works. That's not how it's supposed to work. It would take hours to lay out the problems wired into modern medicine in this country because of this horrid, enforced dependency on patented pharmaceutical drugs. Most of it has to do with the massive size of the industry and the cost of the drugs. The country has turned most of the large hospitals and the resident doctors in them over to the pharmaceutical industry. So much money is being made by the pharmaceutical industry that they have bought their way into all aspects of medical practice. You can't go into a doctor and come out without, they ask you, well, the first thing they ask you when you go to the doctor the first time, how many medicines are you on? How many of you had that asked when you were going to a doctor? That's the first thing you would know. How many are you on? But the industry and the government let them do it. If you're not on a drug now, you soon will be if you're under a doctor's care. It's the standard for the industry right now, and the pharma labs are allowed to go directly to the government or the media selling their scripts. They're on television every hour you turn on. Ask your doctor if you should be taking this. Ask your doctor about this or that. The government lies for them and allows drugs into the marketplace before they've been tested, before they've been proven safe. Even if the FDA and CDC know that there are still questions about the drug. There are several that have been pulled after deaths have occurred, and others have not been pulled even after being proven unsafe. Whether it was proven unsafe because of improper use or prolonged use. Some people start taking something that starts feeling good to them. They just start taking it. And sometimes if you've taken too much, there you go. You go to sue and you find out that a lot of these things you can't sue them because they came through the government. Addiction or misuse can cause horrible consequences with certain drugs. But we've become so used to it that this opioid problem that we're running into is just unbelievable. Opioids are put in that you feel like, oh, they'll remember to take this. No, it's not about them remembering to take it. If it's scheduled to take it, they should be taking it. But the problem is, if you take it with an opioid base, you become addicted to it. Once you become addicted to it, you might take too much. Or you might start, after whatever the malady is, you're still addicted to the drug. And now we've got to go through the whole process of getting you off of that. And there's a few that are really bad news. Prednisone is a synthetic corticosteroid drug that is used to treat a variety of conditions: asthma, adrenal insufficiency, Crohn's disease, and others. Prednisone, being a steroid, can cause depression. I almost sound like a commercial, don't I? Can cause depression, suicidal thoughts and actions, delirium, disorientation, confusion, panic, and manic episodes. Ask your doctor if you should. I don't think so. I don't think so. Methotrexate is a chemotherapy drug. All are toxins. All chemotherapy drugs are toxins. But methotrexate works by antagonizing and inhibiting the absorption of folic acid, an essential B vitamin. Studies have demonstrated that folic acid is necessary to prevent the buildup of homocysteine in the arteries of the heart. Blood homocysteine levels are the best indicator of heart attack risk. Better than cholesterol, actually. One more reason to try natural cures for cancer rather than chemotherapy and radiation, because one of the drugs blocks a vitamin that you need to keep from catching other things. And when you start to deal with multiple drugs and multiple contraindications, we've had members who are on so many different drugs that they were in the hospital because of the drug contraindications. All of the symptoms they were showing were from the contraindications from the drugs that had nothing to do with the sickness that brought them into the hospital in the first place. I won't say any names because we know who they were. And I say were because they're no longer here. And none of them died for what they went into the hospital for. It was the contraindications of all of the drugs that they were on. This is real. And it becomes even more real when it happens to those of our church family or even of our own families. This one was a little bit more personal for me, and I'm still dealing with this. Coumadin or warfarin, blood thinner. It's used to prevent blood clots if you have blockage issues. And you know what it's made out of? Rat poison. Rat poison. You've got two. You've got warfarin, you've got Coumadin. Coumadin needs a weaning off period because there are certain opioids in it. That's why I refused it. I says, okay, I'll take the warfarin for a while, but they said, well, after a year. I said, well, that year's just about up, so I'm coming off of that stuff very soon. And have come up with some things that will work. Rapeseed extract, ginkgo biloba, niacin, vitamin E. Mix these and it should take care of all of that. There are other things that can be dealt with, but it's just amazing the things that they will use to hide the thing for a while. You're not curing anything. You're just making it better for a while. But the things that you make better, okay, suppose you overdose on the rat poison. There you go. Now, how do you know if a drug is a statin drug or an opioid? It has the name statin in it somewhere. If it's got the name statin in it somewhere, it's a statin drug, which means that it pulls out of your organs to make it do what it does. And if it pulls enough out of the organ will fail. That's where you see the dialysis numbers that you see now. That's where you see all of these problems that are coming forth. Cholested, Questron, Prozac. And then the one that they're really trying to push with the kids now, HPV or human papillomavirus vaccine. Merck has spent billions trying to force U.S. children to take their HPV vaccine. Only 3 states have bid so far and made it mandatory. And the testing teams say it will not prevent all forms of the virus. So why are you taking it? And then they're going to say now they're going to force it on 9-year-olds. HPV is a venereal disease. What does an 8 or 9-year-old need to be taking a vaccine for a venereal disease for? That's insane. Yet they've flooded television, flooded radio, flooded most of your music services, Spotify, any of them, with all of these horribly acted commercials trying to scare children into making their parents take them to the doctor and get a vaccine for a venereal virus. This is what we've come to. And we thought, ask your doctor, should you take this drug was bad. Now it's let's scare the kids into bugging their parents into buying our vaccine. I'm going to die, Mom, if we don't take this. It's not about our health anymore. It's about our money. Call it what it is. It's all about our money. And selling us their addictive, side effect laden prescription drugs. And don't dare suggest a natural cure or a change in diet. Oh no, that's not going to work. You can't do that. They'll laugh at you. Literally. If the doctor suggests it is possible, they could lose their practice. So never even ask them about herbs or vitamins or minerals or vitamins or anything like that, because they're not going to suggest that stuff for you. Unless you go to a doctor that specifically does that. But good luck finding one. About 50 have died in the last, 6 months? But you see, all body functions have a use. If misused by drugs, they can make you very ill. Even over-the-counter medications can cause problems if you don't understand what they're doing to you. Let's just look at a small example of how an over-the-counter drug works, and it should give you some idea how the prescription stuff works and how important diet is. Most people don't realize that foods should be combined properly. They teach you that in certain classes, but a lot of people have never heard this. That you don't eat starches with red meats, things like this. People don't realize it. Food combining is very simple. You don't eat proteins with starches, but put simply, you don't eat bread with meat. And what is the biggest meal in America at lunchtime nowadays? Burgers and fries, hot dogs and fries. And you follow that up with a Pepsi or a Coke or two. And don't think that you're getting away with something if you do a diet. Doesn't help. Still got acid in it. An hour later, if you last that long, or if you've not done it so long that your body has grown used to it, your stomach starts to churn from the acid mixture. This is one of the things about the body that is so amazing that we don't understand. Every food we eat produces a different acid for the category that food comes from. That's why they tell you not to eat certain things. They tell you that you shouldn't drink with your meals unless it's water. And even then, you should wait about 20 minutes after the meal before you drink anything. You see, the acid from the bread mixes with the acid from the beef. And now, unless your body has gotten so used to it, it ignores it, now you've got heartburn. So what do? You go out and buy an antacid, Tums, Pepto-Bismol, or some other brand. And what does that do? When you consume it, it neutralizes the stomach acids that are supposed to be breaking your food down in your stomach. And supposed to be breaking that food down into a substance that the body can digest, mining the food for nutrients and expelling what it can't utilize after doing what it does. In other words, waste. The meat will now go to the colon and sit there because of the antacid. Now that meat, because it won't be broken down, because the acids have been neutralized, now it'll just sit in the colon, which is where most cancers begin. Antacids don't allow the body to do what it's supposed to do, break the food down. Thus, illnesses occur because of undigested food left in the body because of the antacids. And that's only one example. They say that the average person dies unless they've done colonics or something else, with at least anywhere between 35 to 45, possibly even, I think it was John Wayne, they said had 50 pounds of undigested meat in his colon when he died. I could talk about how our kids are on Ritalin, which stimulates the exact same brain receptors as cocaine. Whose brilliant idea was that? I remember years ago we had an issue with a teacher, and the teacher was we're gonna put her on Ritalin. I said, no, you're not. Won that fight, but a lot of parents don't. Kids come out of school, they get diagnosed as ADHD or something else, and the next thing you know, they get to high school, they do fine. They go off to college, next thing you know, they're addicted on what? Cocaine. Why? Because the body's already used to it. Why? Because it's working on the same brain receptors as the Ritalin. It's unbelievable. And we just let it happen. Now, a few brave doctors are beginning to question the existence of ADHD, but the prescriptions are still there. And kids are still being put on Ritalin for the least little things. And it's hard to get the kid off these scripts once the schools have put them on them. Even though in a lot of cases the school official that first suggested it has no medical training whatsoever. But there's ample research now that suggests that a lot of the problem is diet and environment, as opposed to something in the home, which they always try to say when they say that the child is on ADHD. The more you look, the more you find that in real science, there are some real doubts in this behavioral area. Many problems are being connected to toxins in the air, poisons in the water, chlorine, fluoride, roll-off pesticides from the other things that are sprayed on the weeds, like Roundup from Monsanto. The soil has eroded from being tended improperly. We were told to rotate crops and let the soil rest every 7 years in the Bible. Early on, it was suggested by farmers. That's not done anymore, because now most of your farms are corporate farms. So it's not about making the food better. It's not about making the soil healthy. It's not even about making a healthy meal. It's about making money. And that's all that really matters. Many of the medical problems that we're going through are a combination of bad diet, living in a house with a smoker. Remember, only it's been about, the last 10 years or so that they made it where you could not smoke, even in your own home. A lot of these problems that are coming up are coming from smoking. But we've reached a point where prayer is the best thing to do. Find a doctor who does believe in real medicines, can put you on a diet where you're eating. A lot of people are starting to go vegan, go vegetarian. I can't say no. That was the original plan. That was the original plan. You will lose weight. A lot of things will happen. Your blood pressure will lower. But a lot of the oral traditions of the Bible have been passed down this way. And at every chance that Satan gets, he tries to block that. No, you don't want to do that, yeah. Because he wants you to die. He wants you sick. He wants you to suffer as long as you can and then die. because he knows that if you can make it through this, he dies. But we have to get to a point where we trust God more so than anything else. Notice this prophecy in Hosea, the 4th chapter, the 3rd verse. Hosea, the 4th chapter, the 3rd verse, where it says, "Therefore the land shall mourn, and everyone who dwells in it shall droop." Look outside. You see people in their 20s look like they're just barely making it through. Everyone who dwells in it shall droop with the beasts of the field and with the birds of the heavens. Yes, the fish of the sea shall also be taken away. Yet let no man strive nor reprove another, for your people are as those who strive with the priest. Now that doesn't mean a whole lot now. But when you think about the days of Hosea, if you went to argue with a priest, you might as well just leave that county, leave that jurisdiction, because the priest had all the power. That was like going after a judge. That was like going after a policeman. You had problems. But this is how we are now. We can eat anything we want. We can do whatever we want. No. Verse 5, "And you shall stumble in the day, and the prophet also shall stumble with you in the night. And I will cut off your mother." That will be your main source of anything. "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you from being priest to me. Since you have forgotten the law of your Elohim, I will also forget your sons, even I." Yet there is hope. More and more people are turning to vitamins, minerals, supplements, and they're fighting their way back to health. The country finally decided to come clean on the damage that smoking does and ban it in most public buildings. And even now, restaurants and private homes are banned from smoking. Hopefully one day it'll get to a point where the tobacco lobby finally has such a weak hold on Washington, D.C., don't count on that, that maybe they'll stop even producing cigarettes. But as long as they're Philip Morris lobbyists blanketing D.C., don't count on it. Because believe me, some fought it. But right now, there are few places where you can smoke publicly, as the science is solid now, and only smokers continue to fight that fight by continuing to smoke. Even with most knowing that the habit is slowly killing them. We can only pray that they can find ways to overcome this deadly habit. For those of you who are struggling, however, with diabetes or other diseases, a few helpful places to start. There are a few books that you can check out if you can find them. Most of them you can find on Amazon.com. One is called Nature's Medicines. Gail McKeskey was the writer. It shows you how you can use natural plants, vitamins, minerals, and things like this to get your body into a state of homeostasis, where you feel better, where the body is at its proper levels. There's another book called The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. It shows you what foods are good, what are not. It goes into a great explanation of GMO and what the problems are there, and shows you what to avoid. Then the old one. This is an old one I found years ago and found another old copy of it, called Sugar Blues. It shows what the problems are with eating sugar generally. It shows the toxicity of reformed sugar. That's white sugar. All sugar is pretty much the same unless it's from a fruit or that itself. Any sugar is going to do something to you. The author's name is William Duffy. Last book you may remember, because I think we gave it as a gift at the feast a couple of years ago, called The Great Physician by Jordan Rubin. Shows you what to eat, how to combine foods, different things like that. I may actually still have a copy of that one laying around somewhere. But all of these books are helpful in showing you how to. The trick is not to once you get to the doctor, the best thing to do is to try to get to a point where you never have to go. Eat the right things, drink plenty of water, fresh water. And right now, unfortunately, that is not what's coming out of your tap. I would go so far as to say don't drink. If you can possibly avoid it, do not drink tap water. I know, well, that's hard. Or if you can, if you have to, filter it. Filter it heavily. If you can find one, get a reverse osmosis filtration system. Gets all the junk out of the water, because there's so much stuff in the water now, the fluoride, the chlorine. And now what they're finding out is so many people are on these prescription drugs, they dump the drugs into their toilet, and stuff goes out into the water. And the filtration plants can't filter that stuff out. And there people go in for the doctor and they find out that they've got drugs in their system that they never took because it's in the water. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. But as we have seen here in this church, sometimes there's only one answer. Satan hates this one because he can do nothing about it. So we saved it for last. James, the 5th chapter, the 14th verse. This is the reason that some of us are still here. James, the 5th chapter, the 14th verse, where it says, "Is any among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of Elohim. And the prayer of faith will cure the sick, and Elohim shall raise him up. And if he has committed sins, it will be forgiven him." Satan hates to hear us talk like that, because that means we believe. That means we have faith. And that means he's got to work that much harder. But we all have to pray that we can find our way back to health. That we who have our health can work to keep it. For the days are getting worse, and we have to find our way back to the health and longevity promised us in Proverbs. We have to stand on that rock and pray for his intervention as we struggle into these last days. And if we can make it into these last days and get through it all, we will make it into a kingdom where there will be no sickness. There will be no death. There will be no more of the kind of chicanery that we see in the medical profession right now. What you see where we've got pharmaceutical companies just control everything, and no one dare go against them and challenge them, not even the people that were put there to do so. When the FDA and CDC go against you, those are the people that they were there to stop this. Yet they're taking money for it. The only real answer we have left is our Father. Let us continue to pray and believe that this lie of imprecision will be shown to be the lie that it is, even if it has to be done in the kingdom of God. Bless you all.